This is the Constructionist Podcast, where we take ancient stories, the person of Jesus, current events and topics, and help you construct a new Christian worldview that's relevant and loving to those around you. I'm your host, Kevin Bates. I'm a semiotician and community builder looking at the signs of the times to build a better future together. You are tuned into the Constructionist Podcast, and tonight we are continuing our series on cults. So we encourage at the Constructionists a worldview that is built on the principles of Christ, and in this episode we are examining modern cults through a clear and honest lens. Well, next week we're bringing up a new topic, which we will advertise over this next 5 days, and next Thursday we are examining other people's holidays. So next week, we're going to do one episode on other people's holidays. So stay tuned to that. And we hope by doing this podcast, we offer insights and perspectives that will help you in your journey towards a greater understanding of love and compassion for yourself and others. So we want to assure you that in tonight's episode, we will not be fabricating anything as many have done over the past. We are just going to inform you. We're going to give you ideas. We're going to give you thoughts. And if we're going to be quoting things or giving you information, we're going to tell you where to find it. So our goal is to provide an honest and authentic perspective on our examination of tonight modern day cults. So this is our thinking space where we're presenting ideas and thoughts. And tonight we're making our best attempt to explain very practical ideas and practical, well, I would say modern day groups that are in society that we need to stay clear of, or we just don't need to get trapped into some of these philosophies, ideas, thoughts, or ideologies. So if you enjoy the Constructionist Podcast and want to support us financially, please follow the link in the chat or the show notes on the social media platform you're listening to and visit our Give page. You can also visit our Patreon page at The Constructionists. So your support enables us to continue producing high quality content like you're going to hear tonight. Well, we're going to try our very best in going over 10 different ideas, cults and ideas tonight that are just the far out reaches of how society behaves and the groups that we form. We're going to go just do a deep dive into cults, but also some cult, I would say, just signature markers of cults that we need to recognize that exist in religions, including evangelical Christianity and other branches of Christianity. And so we're doing our best attempt to explain some of those ideas as well that you can honestly see sometimes in your own churches, Christian churches. So we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. We believe that through our interactions and discussions with listeners like you, we can continue to learn together and grow together, develop a communal hermeneutic. So we value your feedback, your questions, your ideas, and we're excited to build a community around these discussions. So don't hesitate to reach out, leave us some notes, leave us some direct messages, ask us a question, and we'll do our very best to answer it in a very informed way. So Sharia and Jake, thanks for joining us. We're excited to be here talking about, well, I would say 10 different ideas of cults. So we have cults, which we have about 7 cults, 1/8 surprise cult that we're going to go over tonight, that even Jake and Sharia don't know what we're going to talk about, the 8th cult. But then we're going to talk about 2 subjects of cults, subject signature ideas that we see in cults, but we also see those in churches. And honestly, we need to deconstruct those ideas in churches because it does make our faith communities culty, where we have some signature ideas that have been adopted into cults right at the heart of our communities, our faith communities. So we need to be very careful with that. So Jake and Shreya, how you doing tonight?
Hey, doing okay.
Good, thanks, Kevin.
Awesome. Well, next week, we are going to talk a little bit about other people's holidays. And we're going into the holiday season. And there are some very special holidays that are just not on anybody's radar, that I think just moving into this November, fall, The colors are changing, the leaves are falling. It's getting awfully rainy here in Portland's metro area. So I just want during this season to talk 1 week on just a list of other people's holidays. We talk a lot about Christmas. We talk a lot about Thanksgiving. We talk a lot about this season of holiday. But there are other cultures. We live in a very pluralistic society. We live in a very diverse society. And so talking about many other holidays, I think is important to honor, to give respect to, and to acknowledge. And so that's what we're going to do next week. But before that, we're finishing this topic on cults. Sharia, please, you've started us out every week so far with a definition of, like a working definition of cult. Now, last week we talked about the occult, which is very specific. So this is the cult, a cult. So this word cult has a certain definition that honestly all religions fall under the definition of cult. Really, we've kind of come to that conclusion, the traditional like Oxford dictionary definition of cult. But then we have a practical definition. So Shrey, give us those two definitions and just create the thinking space for us.
Yeah, so the dictionary definition of a cult is a religious system that is worship is organized around a central figure or object. And then the definition that we're using to talk about cults is a religious group that's characterized by high control environment and a charismatic, if not narcissistic, leader.
So it's the narcissistic, controlling leader that is the practical, that's the signature practical definition of cult. And honestly, most of your weird groups that you say, well, that's a weird group, whether it be like Branch Davidians or Hale-Bopp Comet people, Heaven's Gate, or things like that, you definitely see this is where you get that high controlling leader, which is very, very dangerous to follow, to be a part of these groups. So let's talk about the first group. We have a list of 8 that we're going to go over. Some many people have heard of, others not so familiar. Some have ended up on Netflix series that we're going to go over tonight. We're going to give you a little more information, hopefully, than the media has. But the first cult we're going to go over is called Twin Flames. Twin Flames is, well, you can look them up on a website, but Twin Flames is what is considered a dating cult. And Rolling Stones did an article some time ago, and they just kind of defined it, and it was really interesting that they defined it as a cult. I mean, for a modern magazine just to come out and just define something as a cult, I found that really interesting, that a popular online magazine like that would say this is a cult. And it does fall under that category of high controlling leaders. Now, in Christianity, in the purity movement, we had something in the 90s and all the way to today, but you had something that emerged in the 90s with some books like I Kissed Dating Goodbye, or some leaders in homeschool movements and such, where you had a divine styled partner, that God picked out your partner for you, and that it was your quest or your, I guess, enlightenment that you found this person, that God picked you out for me. Now, I would say that, many people that are married or have life partners would say, you're just a God send, that God just really orchestrated this. And I believe that there's nothing wrong with that, and just by saying that. But when you're saying that God is so intricately involved in your dating life, I think that is really quite. It goes down roads that this group went down. Ultimately, twin flames, that's what it's about. That you have a divinely ordained partner in life called your twin flame. People that are extremely lonely in life, I have been in those states, other people have been in those states of mind, that it's really easy to fall into these traps of lonely for love. And they definitely prey on people that are not just single, but they prey on people that are lonely, that there's a soulmate out there. Now, this sounds very Christian because we've heard this indoctrinated in our youth groups and our churches. So let's stop there before we continue on with twin flames. I really want to camp on that subject just for a few minutes. Let's deconstruct that because I think that that's a very unhealthy doctrine and teaching in the church. So let's start there. The God ordained life partner, what they term twin flame.
Well, if I just think about the God ordained life partner, I would probably place our current thoughts of it, on Elizabeth Elliot in the 40s and 50s. Her husband was Jim Elliot, got killed on the banks of they're probably more than 40s, 50s. I forget when it is, but he got killed on the banks of the
Amazon.
And his diaries are wonderful, and part of his posthumous impact is that him and Elizabeth got married in 2 weeks from meeting.
Yeah.
And so marriage God's way is you're going to know within 2 weeks if that person is right for you or not. And so if you don't know within 2 weeks, there's something wrong with you or with the other person. And so judgment is cast very quickly.
Right. So this reminds, Sheree, do you have opening thoughts on just the idea of the twin flame, the God ordained life partner?
Like we're deconstructing the idea of soulmates.
Oh, yeah, please deconstruct.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that just doesn't work is if you're not with somebody, then the problem is you. You must be doing something wrong. There must be sin in your life, or you're not following God's will for your life, or so there's a ton of blame that gets passed for that too.
So shame. There's shame around it. Yeah.
The hardest thing to reconcile. The hardest thing to reconcile as well is that all Jesus' teaching on marriage is to remain single. All Paul's teaching on marriage is to remain single. But if you are married, follow these rules, but remain single as I am. So in the New Testament, we don't have a lot of guidance on children, having children, not having children. And so when there's such a big push in Christian culture right now to have children, to be married, for your quiver to be full or whatever that is, there's nothing in Scripture at all to back that up.
Right. So this reminds me of when I was in youth ministry, and we used to go to these purity seminars, I Kiss Dating Goodbye or Romance God's Way, where you got the silver ring thing, so you married Jesus type of thing. And so there's this idea in Christianity of celibacy until marriage, but there's also this idea of sex being like elevated to either the pinnacle of existence or the pinnacle of sin. And so somehow over a long period of time, intimacy, romance, relationships, marriage, all of this became a very heightened subject over a long period of time. And you can look back on art in the church or sculptures in the church where, everybody was like naked on the screen, right? You had like nude statues and nude paintings. And then it's known that some of the popes came in ancient popes came in, and they painted over these scenes, or they
Is it
covered
the Pope
Jesus in.
innocent?
Yeah, they basically covered because they were, concerned that people were stumbling. So this idea that nudity or sex or intimacy relationships became very shameful over a long period of time. So that the core in Christianity, the relationship or just sexual intimacy with another person is a very shame based topic. There's right at the core. There's just a shame all around it. Um, well, how does that play out? If you're single, then all of a sudden that becomes a shame existence where there's something wrong with you. You haven't reached this pinnacle of existence. You haven't reached this, well, what would be in some religious circles, the sacrament of marriage. So we attain this sacrament type ascension. There's an ascension. And this is what Twin Flames has definitely capitalized on, and I'm saying that for very specifically. Money is attached to this. And so this idea that your jelly's out there for your peanut butter, basically, that relationship is there. Your eggs and bacon, your eggs and your bacon, or that someday your spice will hit your pumpkin. So I think that this idea of the God-ordained relationship that we have according to the Bible is between us and God. That's the divine relationship. Our relationship with people is supposed to be just infiltrated with love and loving our neighbor and working for the success of the other people, especially the other. So loving our neighbor, but also doing well for the other. So those are the divine commandments, divine relationships. So I think that Twin Flames has taken this um, entirely too far. They have courses you can take. They have coaching that you can sign up for. Of course,
Is it
all of
kind of like
this is.
the Rentwell courses?
I'm
The
not
what?
sure what
Never
the
mind.
what. Oh,
Rentwell. It's like
oh,
pre-renting houses.
oh. Yes,
Pre-dating.
Oh,
like you kind of go through an assessment, it's definitely a dating
A creepy
culture.
harmony.
The challenge with the flame or the twin flames, I'm going to read this right off their website. So these are the facts that they give. So this is not made up. This is their theology or their ideology that they believe. So this is it. Your ascension coach, this person, is the secret to unlocking the full potential of the teachings of union. So an ascension coach is like a requirement, or it's the key that's going to open this door. So having the support of a highly trained professional to help guide you navigate this journey is critical to your success. So if you do a little deep diving, you'll find that the highly qualified or highly trained professional definitely is a subjective title and degree that this person has. So the teaching of union guarantees the way to your harmonious union with your twin flame and will help bring you not only your beloved twin flame, but a permanent sense of deep peace, abundance, joy, and eternal connection to love within yourself. So then what makes the teaching of union different? So it's like what's different about this, right? The teaching of union demonstrates that Separation from your twin flame is an illusion which can be healed permanently in this lifetime by purifying your consciousness. Everyone has a twin flame, and that all twin flames were created to live life together in harmonious union as best friends, partners, teachers, students, to each other, and as lovers. So there's a problem there. What about all the single people? So all upsets, blocks, and barriers to love can be healed permanently because only love is real and love never fails. Sounds very Christian. The path of ascension of twin flames is the call home to union with God, and harmonious union with your twin flame is guaranteed through sincere and commitment studying of these teachings, which cost you money, which the key to these teachings is through a highly qualified trainer, or basically this ascension coach that they call him. So the challenge with this cult, and Rolling Stones called them a cult. The challenge with this cult is, what happens if you feel like you're with the wrong person? That's the challenge. They're telling you that this is, that they know what your twin flame is, and you found your twin flame, and this is the thing that you are committed to, and all things can be worked out. So just in a little shallow dive, you can see that this could be and is riddled with all kinds of unhealthy relationships and sticking with people that are probably not your twin flame match. I mean, if you just think about it for 2 seconds. But it's like I would say it's like a manufactured cure for loneliness and that lack of hope that we sometimes get during loneliness. So this is a manufactured cure, which is really sad to prey on lonely people.
I mean, that's what dating apps do.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, all of them.
There's a marketing ploy there.
Loneliness, and they know exactly at what point you're going to be most lonely, and so they send advertisements to your algorithm to be there, and it's proven.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a spoiler alert. So if you have not watched the movie Elemental on Disney Plus, tune me out for like 30 seconds. But in the movie, there's two different. Oh, have you not seen? Okay, there's two different elements, right? There's fire and water, and they're exact opposite, but they're twin flames. And the mom in the end puts the candles together. They both light their candles. One has to maneuver himself to light it. The other can just light it because she's fire. That's easy. But they spiral together and they're twin flames. They can't be separated. And that's true love. So it's interesting, like hearing this now and knowing like, wow, that kind of permeated right through into Disney.
I could be wrong, but I think that might actually be a concept in some indigenous American spiritualities.
I'm sure.
I am not certain, though. I don't think they came up with the idea. I think the idea of twin flames has been around for a very long time.
Very long time. But it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think also just to expand a little bit, this philosophy of twin flames starts with the premise. Let's call it the twin flames universe, because that's what they call it. The twin flames universe. I wonder, and just call God the universe for a minute.
Maybe the metaverse.
For those that don't believe in God, right? And they enter into the twin flames universe. I don't know if you can, but let's say somebody is not a believer in God and they join this group, so they believe in the universe. Does the universe owe us a damn thing? That's the question. Like philosophically, what they're saying is that God owes us something, this twin flame.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I don't think it does, but we live a way where the universe looks like it owes us something and gives us something.
Yeah, that's the way that we act in our selfish, self-indulgent desires and wants and actions. Uh, that's why we treat the planet the way that we treat it. That's why we do the things that we do to others, because we think that it's owed to us or that we deserve it or something like that. And in all honesty, I love the Barack Obama statement when he was questioned, how did you, as an African American, how do you feel about being the president and attaining this high, powerful role? Do you feel like this is your course? This is your, the course that God, designed for you, or what do you think about it? And he said, I'm just lucky. And I really appreciated that about him, that just statement of, it wasn't some divine course. It wasn't, pulling myself up by my bootstraps and working hard. It wasn't all that, because there's lots of people who work hard. There's lots of people who try. There's lots of people who do a lot of things, and they end up in the same position that they are in currently. So to say, well, I just did the right thing, studied the right teaching, listened to the right shamans, whether they be, your dime store shamans or your real shamans. I listened to the right people, therefore I attained this ascension. Therefore, I got a girlfriend or boyfriend, eventually a wife or a husband. I just find that almost arrogant. That's an arrogant philosophy.
Yes.
Twin Flames, first cult. Rajneesh, let's go number 2 out of our top 10. Rajneesh, the Bhagwan. You guys were Oregon natives, so speak about the Bhagwan. I mean, let's talk about this Rajneesh character. I don't think that he probably was insincere. I think that he probably was very sincere, probably believed actually what he was teaching, came up with some methodologies and methods and stuff to his practice. What do you think of the Rajneesh and the effect on basically Oregon? Because that's where they lived and where their compound was, here in Oregon. So what was your experience with them, and what did you think of them at the time?
Well, I just double checked Wikipedia really quick, and I was not actually alive for most of their existence here, so I don't remember anything.
Okay.
But mostly,
Okay.
I mean, it's like the pop culture stuff and the trappings of it, the old-fashioned cars and the orangish colored robes, and what was it, poisoning salad bars or something like that?
At the Izzy's in the Dalles?
Yeah.
I forget that you two were
I mean,
born in like the late 80s, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was not alive.
Wow. Okay.
I was not
Boy, am
alive.
I
when this was
feeling old
happening.
right now. So the series of events is they started promoting their practices. They purchased land
In
out in the
Antelope.
desert there in Oregon. They began building a compound.
Lovely compound, yeah.
Lovely compound. Started raising lots and lots of money.
Had free sex and just
Well, people were flocking to this compound because it was like a haven for,
it was utopia.
Just a utopia of freedom, kind of like another hippie type movement, in his time. And I look at this compound now. It's actually Washington Ranch, and it's owned by Young Life.
Yeah, the Young Life.
Yeah, the Young Life camp. And when you drive on that campus, it is
amazing.
It is magnificent. It is awe. Like, you are in awe of this campus, where you're like, wow, okay, this was a compound and a half. They had their own airstrip. They had their own like freezers and coolers for all the meat and the supplies, and the end of the world and stuff, or whatever they were headed towards.
Yeah.
They actually were under the influence of like a secondary character, kind of an assistant, and that assistant did a lot of illegal activity, whether that be promoted by the Rajneesh or whether that be promoted by, other people in power. We know that this person, this secondary person, definitely promoted some illegal activity to try to swing elections for power. So they were trying to swing some elections at the state level and the local level. And so poisoning a salad bar, basically an assassination plot by a U.S. attorney. So that's why that salad bar was poisoned. But they started welcoming houseless people into their community to try to swing some votes to raise the population to get more voting power
Yeah, I believe
within
he was
this
trying
community.
to. They were trying to make the Bhagwan county commissioner, right?
Well, they were just trying to get more and more power and their people into
Office.
commissioner seats, counselor seats, some, what we would call commissions now, people that like planning, the planning commission, to get people of their people in there so they could just do more, build more, take over more. I mean, it was a crisis for people who lived there. It was an absolute crisis. Their houses were purchased up. They were just run out of town. These poor people were literally run out of town.
I'm getting text from my mom in the other room.
Oh,
she said they tried to poison people. Yeah, she said they tried to poison people so that they couldn't vote because the Rajneesh were running for office.
Right.
There you go.
So this idea of building a compound, coming with this this sense of ideology, I don't know if like they really had maybe ill intentions, because what I read is it doesn't seem like they had ill intentions when they came.
It's still
just it morphed over time.
It's still a conspiracy, right? That they may not have even been the ones to poison it. They were just framed for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be that. I would say that whenever you have a leader that's that powerful in a narcissistic, controlling role, like Sharea's definition, he would definitely present. I've seen him present. I haven't seen him present. I've listened to him present.
It's a wonderful Netflix
videos.
documentary of it.
Yeah, there is a Netflix documentary on this, like a long one, so you can watch it and see it. What happened to these Oregonians and what happened to the Rajneeshis? But they would sit in like a teaching setting, and he had that like professor type role, and so he spoke very authoritatively and very engaging and very like honestly they people felt transformed.
Yeah.
I've heard interviews of people that still feel transformed from that time. So it's not like people weren't experiencing something. They were experiencing, whether that be a self-enlightenment or a self-realization about who they were, maybe a mind transfer, maybe even emotional health. I have no idea. But what they were experiencing, there's actually just a continuation for some people that they really experienced something very, very special there under his teaching. And his teaching was a mix. So a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Sikhism, a little bit of all of it. So it was like an eclectic teaching. I would say Eastern mysticism or Eastern mystic type teaching, along with a lot of, I guess, well, everything was sacred, so therefore sex was sacred, so therefore the act of that, and that's where people would do things or act out in ways that became unhealthy. They used to dance, and they had these like dancing moves that they would do to literal exhaustion, to the point that they were passing out. So there were these specific moves that they would do that definitely was almost like a meditation practice. So As strange as that may sound, um, I don't think it's that strange. What do you
That's not
guys
the
think?
culty part.
No, no. The culty part is where I send this guy all of my money. I sell my house,
Hmm.
and now he has how many Rolls Royces? How much money did this guy leave the country with? I mean, an unbelievable amount of money.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the amount of jewelry and the amount of watches and the amount of gold that this guy had was absolutely unbelievable. But people gave it to him willfully. Um,
Yeah.
I just had to look up really quick. He had 365 Rolls Royces on that compound,
One
one
for every
per
day of the
day.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, a different Rolls Royce every day. Wow. Um, I would say that the Rajneeshis, which is now called Osho, which is in India, and there's a resort there that you can go to practice the Bhagwan's ideology and like the reconciliation of the new man. And so you can go there to this resort and practice it. So he is a recognized religion in India. So actually, he wouldn't necessarily be a cult. That would be taken off the cult list. Although his practices in Oregon definitely
Culty.
would be would be
Exhibited some
seen yeah
control.
as culty. Yeah, Rajneesh, Scientology. Number 3. Scientology is when you hold the handles and you get audited. Some people don't think that Scientology is a cult. Some people, like some of the people who have escaped from Scientology, definitely see it as a cult. Jake, do you want to take Scientology just for a few minutes and open it up? What is it?
It's centered around a book called Dianetics, and
Mhm.
lots of famous people are Scientologists, like Tom Cruise, and I think he's the most popular one of all time. And it's basically
John,
a
John Travolta, too.
John Travolta, sure,
Yeah.
lots of famous people. Um, and so it's centered around going clear and losing stress and knowing yourself better.
Yeah.
A lot of when you hold those two probes, they're doing a stress test on you, and they can tell how clear you are. You tell all of your secrets, and then you give them lots of money, and the church has then leverage over you to stay within their control. And so when people leave, they're usually harassed and assaulted and
Followed.
harassed, yeah,
Mhm.
cut off from all communication with their family, that they're still in the church. And sometimes they'll even have things published about them that they told the church. And it's this nasty cycle of control and fear that keeps people and makes them still give. L. Ron Hubbard, I think, is the
Yep.
Dianetics guy. There's other super popular people that are the leaders of the Church of Scientology.
Well, L. Ron Hubbard is the one who created it. He lived in a very lavish lifestyle, ended up disappearing. Nobody knows what happened to him. He just
He
missing
ascended.
person status, ascended or whatever. Part of the challenge with Scientology, Shreya, have you ever met a Scientologist?
Not that I'm aware of.
There was a booth at the Tiger Street Fair right in front of our shop that was doing the Dianetics testing. I did not
That's
go
fun.
and do it because I'm pretty sure that my Claire would be black.
Yeah.
What isn't when you drive down Sunset Boulevard? What is that purplish or pinkish built compound? Is that Scientology?
You mean the blue compound building?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is the main headquarters or one of the main headquarters of Scientology. So we actually here in Oregon have a Scientology school. It's in Sheridan.
Delphi.
It's just south here, and it's called the Delphian School. So my interactions have not been a tremendous amount, but we have definitely interacted with Scientologists because we don't live that far from that school. Very interesting people. I don't think that they're bad people by any means. Scientologists are not bad people. I've never really met a mean Scientologist because honestly, they kind of have to not be mean, to be clear. The challenge is that they're mean to you if you want to get out of Scientology. So you're like the anti at that point. So if you disassociate yourself and say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, they disfellowship you, which they claim that they don't. But most religions claim that they don't. They're just doing it to try to win you back, type of thing. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But Scientology, basically in Dianetics, and I've read Dianetics before, and there's a whole series on either Netflix or Amazon, one of those streaming services, that talks through Scientology and interviews people that have broken free. But if you just read Dianetics, you'll see that it takes the mind and divides it into categories and talks about like the reactive mind and the sensitive mind and all these things, and bringing the mind under control, basically. And it's a set of beliefs and practices around the mind. So they believe that they're very scientific. They believe that they're very, I would say, like not, they don't believe in psychology. They don't believe in the medicine of psychology, or the practice of psychology or counseling. They don't believe in any of that. They actually think that that is like an anti thing, because they have a handle on their own psychology, and this is the right psychology. So it's a belief and practice surrounding around L. Ron Hubbard's teaching, which the new leaders and such are very controlling, and honestly, quite scary. I would say that it gets scary because when you leave the organization, and I'll call it an organization, they definitely treat you with harassment and stuff, and it's almost criminal. Well, it is criminal what they've done, and they've been charged with crimes even recently, here in the last handful of years. So yeah, Scientology, it's a practice, it's a religion, it's seen as it's a honored, like an identified religion in the United States. They are tax free. The challenge there is they have like a ton of money willfully given, but they're actually selling a product, and that's the challenge that people are having with Scientology. Is they're selling a program, they're selling a product, they're selling like these levels of stuff.
Yeah.
So Scientology. Let's go to Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate. Are you old enough to remember Heaven's Gate?
Yes, I was alive for this one.
What do you remember
That
about
was-
Heaven's Gate?
What? It was like 96, wasn't it?
97, yeah.
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 I was 9, so
Okay. Well, I mean, that's okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about Heaven's Gate? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I don't think it made a ton of sense to me at the time.
Right.
It
Well-
would have been kind of scary. Let's maybe, in case folks don't know which one Heaven's Gate is, that's the one where
they drink the Kool-Aid.
people
right?
were supposed to be what?
Is
No,
this-
no,
okay.
the
No,
Kool-Aid
no,
was People's Temple.
Yeah,
Okay.
People's Temple. Yeah.
Heaven's Gate is the Comet Hale Bop,
Right.
and folks believed that they would be able to make it to heaven if they died just right at the right time as the comet was passing, and it was a really gross and brutal death.
Right.
And they had
Well, and they
matching
would be able to-
outfits
they'd-
modeled after Star Trek.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say that, which is really interesting. There's a lot of prophecy involved in it.
Mhm.
There's a lot of UFO theology involved in it. There's a lot of 2000 millennialism. theology in it. There's reincarnation theology in it, which is really weird because the leader of this, I have to look at, I don't have his name written on Applewhite.
Hmm.
Yeah, Applewhite was supposedly the Jesus reincarnate. Some people believe that about him. So there's a lot of just mix of theologies and philosophies, eschatology and Christian asceticism and purity and all of these things. Revelation, and these groups are very relevant, revelation oriented, and times we need to, just blow off of this earth. The challenge with some of these groups is this is one of the mass suicide groups, which is
Hmm.
really sad, to me, that we had these. This is a very, I would say, one of the most famous cults, but one of the most dangerous famous cults was the Hale Bopp Heaven's Gate um, type people. You know what they made their money by doing? This was in the .com era.
What?
They built websites for people. So some people, after these
Okay.
people left, still had websites that were built by Heaven's Gate.
They're like
I'm
the
pretty
first
sure
another
their
one.
website is still functioning.
Oh, they still exist today. After all those
Hmm.
people die, they still think that there's another chance to jump into, like, warp
comment.
speed on a some kind of probably new asteroid or whatever that's coming through.
Comment
So
off.
NXIVM, basically this cult, NXIVM.
No.
So whether that's a number, the 14 is in there. So we're not sure. We've analyzed that as like, is this a number? Is this Nixivum? What is this? Not sure. But this actually used women as sex slaves, right at the center. That's the heart of this cult, if you've ever heard of NXIVM. Another dangerous cult that's heard and that still exists. There's still followers of this person, even though he died within our lifetime, is the Manson family. I can't believe the Manson family still exists, but there's people still in jail that are followers of the Manson family, and they murdered some people, and they are considered dangerous to society. David Koresh and the Branch Davidians still exist today, even though they all burned up and a bunch of people burned in that fire. Horrible. Children, families, adults, women, children, awful in the federal standoff of David Koresh. And the Branch Davidians, they still exist. They're an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist group. I still can't believe they exist. All relationships, when you join the compound, those marriages were annulled and everyone married the great David Koresh. And he took all the females, including children, as wives. 77 people died in this. All right. And then the Children of God. The Children of God is now renamed Family International. And the challenge with the Family International, or the Children of God group, they got into a huge, big trouble because they, according to their website and what they believed is having like sex between the members got you closer to God. And so the whole group was just having sex with one another, including children, including vulnerable, including just brothers and sisters and cousins. And so as an incestuous type group, now they're an online community. So they've rebranded themselves, just so you know, they're no longer the Children of God, but they're the same, called the Family International. Of course, Jake already mentioned the People's Temple. They went down to Guyana, and they were actually disciples of Christ church under Jim Jones' leadership. So they all perished down there because while the feds started questioning them and asking questions, and they got scared, and so therefore they took the juice. That's the joke everyone tells of drinking the Kool-Aid, which is a terrible joke because it's
Death.
it's people.
Yeah.
So those are just a few snippets, just a I don't want to say shotgun approach. That's awful when we're talking about this, but just a popcorn approach of the murderous cults, the deadliest cults that we've ever seen. But there are, folks, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cults out there that haven't been and should be charged with sexual assault, rape of children, molestation, multiple marriages, incestuous relationships, and just crazy town. There's some, like, when somebody puts themselves in that leader role, I am Moses, I am Jesus, I am the Bhagwan, I am the Rajneesh, I am this, whatever that person and whatever they want to call them, the shaman of the day. When somebody's putting themselves in, like David Koresh, I'm the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, or I have the truth that you need to know. You need to question that. I love my friend John, and he told me, I really appreciate you, Kevin, because you get in front of people and you say, not quite sure about this. I think I'm about 65% sure on what I'm talking about today. And so if you don't hear stuff like that, and if you hear, I am telling this truth, boy, you need to question. Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. Last one before the surprise.
Oh, wow.
Anyone want to tackle this one for a few minutes?
They're still very alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually found in Utah, Idaho.
Arizona too.
Yeah, and then just the far out desert places where people won't search too much for them. Centered around polygamy. And so polygamous practices, one man, lots of wives, lots of children, usually intermarriage.
Mm-hmm.
The family tree is a stump.
Doesn't fork. Yeah.
The family tree does not fork. It just has lots of twigs. So the obviously wrong, but they opened up the files and found a whole bunch of underage marriages, and that's what got the leader in trouble. But I think it's under the banner.
The prophet. He's called the prophet. Yeah.
The prophet. Okay. Is it under the banner of heaven? Isn't that it talks about Krakow? John Krakow talks about that specific movement. That's a super famous book on it, and murder.
There's
and
a
stuff like that in it.
series too, if you're not a reader.
Yeah.
It is very dark,
though. Series too. I think it's a series now. But
if you can handle this amount of darkness, these are dark groups that are out there.
Well, I mean, that is the life of a cult, is that once you go closer to the center, it gets darker and darker and darker, and you can't find your way out.
Right.
Because it's so dark.
Okay, so let's transition. Let's transition into the surprise.
Surprise.
So when I was younger, I moved to North Idaho. And I moved to a town called Sandpoint, Idaho. And during that era of actually going and visiting my grandmother and taking trips up to North Idaho, there was a group in, let's just call it in Kootenai County, Idaho, and predominantly Hayden Lake. And they were called the Aryan Nations.
Oh, no.
The Aryan Nations was a neo-Nazi white supremacy group. And this group was led by somebody named Richard Butler. Richard Butler identified as a Christian, so everything that he spoke about or was actually through the filter of his version or his interpretation of scripture, that the white Aryan was a supreme being. So the Jews then ended up killing Jesus, so they're the anti, so they're wrong and they have eternally been deemed wrong. And then people of color are, they would probably deem that as the mark of Cain and things like that. And I've heard him speak and such, and he definitely speaks in this way. Very hateful group. I would say that it gave North Idaho probably an eternal reputation of having that group there. There's other people that live there that have taken over leadership from Richard Butler, absorbed, merged his groups into other groups, but I won't name because honestly, I don't want to be probably
Flagged.
threatened with my life. I'm here, but there is a church in Sandpoint that aligns themselves to a very Aryan version of Christianity. So they have been in trouble for a very long period of time, because when you're just publicizing yourself out there as an Aryan white supremacy group, that is developing an army. So Butler's army, that means guns, that means federal involvement and such. And so there was quite a few accusations and quite a few, I guess, threats back and forth and such. But Richard Butler eventually died. What's really interesting about this group is they weren't very big at all, but their message was huge. And neo-Nazis in North Idaho, everybody knows that. But at their peak, at their very, very peak, they were literally only 200 people. So 200 people
With a lot of guns.
developed a message that was a worldwide power. So if you think about like how influential cult groups can actually be, just think about the Aryan Nation and their message and how far reaching that is. They were broken up several times. They declined, over the years. They would increase, they would decrease in number. So Butler only had 200 people when he died, but those began to merge. So there's another pastor of the Aryan nations, now in Coeur d'Alene, that merged with this Aryan nation group. They definitely adhere to a Christian ideology. They used to at least dress in blue shirts with the Aryan symbols and such on them. And then the kids or the young people were skinheads. So they wore the braces. They had the leather braces with white t-shirts and acid wash usually, or blue jeans of some kind.
And
Um,
Dawkins.
and Doc Martens. Yeah, that's where Doc Martens gets a really difficult association. You'll see a lot of Aryans, these types of people, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You'll see them around. Now their theology or their ideology has infiltrated and kind of merged with other groups. So you'll see nuances of Aryan theology within other groups that will remain unnamed. But these other groups in 2016 surged, and so you'll see even today there's groups all around. So the point of that, bringing that up as this is the surprise cult that I had, is I interacted with some of these people in North Idaho. They were very just at surface level kind people.
You were
They would
white.
shake your hand. At surface level, they were just workers. They didn't wear their clothes all the time. You couldn't identify them on the street unless they were in a uniform. So they're just plain clothes associates walking around spreading this ideology about white supremacy. And at the core of who they were, and at the core of their ideology and their theology, was a sense of evil that goes way, way deep. Something that Jesus was dealing with at the time of his life on earth is that idea of supremacy and trying to break down that idea of supremacy back then. So it's unfortunate that those groups exist. So white supremacy, neo-Nazis, the Aryan Nation, I think is a cult to, because their message was so powerful. I think they're a cult that we definitely still today, and with after and going into 2024, I think we definitely need to pay attention to, okay, what's the messaging coming from some of these subgroups that are out there too. All right. Any thoughts on anything that we've talked about so far?
Lots. I just want to name names right now, but I won't.
I don't think we should. We've already gotten death threats in our life in the last handful of years.
Just some roosters.
Yeah. So Sharia brought up the idea of isolation and the secrecy and the power and the control, just in her definition of narcissism and such. And can we just take a couple of minutes? Like, how do we get trapped in these things? Because they're easy to get trapped in, I think.
I mean, I think if you've got an effective leader, they are going to know how to exploit vulnerabilities. So, for example, the Twin Flames group and exploiting people's loneliness. Or, I mean, you could even make the case of Scientology exploiting people's desire to grow as a person.
Yeah.
That's almost like their lack of self-esteem or self-worth, I think. Maybe it's like a lack of self-concept is Scientology.
Yeah.
I think
So
fear tactics too. There's fears there that people have that people capitalize on.
Yeah. There's also the relational aspect, because often
Right.
when you're first interacting with members of a cult group, you get love bombed. So they show huge interest in your life and want to know everything about you, and gifts, or they buy you dinner, or things that take care of you, things that make you feel loved, things that make you feel like you're embedded in a community. And then that part kind of starts to dwindle, but you're already hooked. And in order to leave, you've either got to lose all of your relationships in order to be able to leave. And that's too risky, especially if you're vulnerable.
Yeah. There's a multi-level marketing works the same way.
Yeah.
I think that's the easiest gateway that we have towards culty behavior is through sales of goods and services and products, right?
Right.
What Kevin read off of the Twin Flame site sounded so much like an MLM pitch.
Totally.
And that's all they're based on. It's like at our Tigard location of our shop, there's a certain MLM group that meets there often, and I warn our new baristas going in, if anyone seems like they're coming on to friendship way too fast for you, it's because they're this group. I'm like, do not meet with them. Do not meet with
Mhm.
them. Do not give them your phone number. Dear God, do not sit down and meet with them because your relationship will be over. It's always this. It's a bait and switch too. Cults are bait and switches.
Yeah.
I would say that there's a couple of things that to pay attention to when it comes to cults. If if some of these cults, they still have people in them, like Heaven's Gate. How in the world, in your history, just looking at the history of Heaven's Gate, why in the world would you join that? And why would you be continuing on in this practice? It's just a sense of indoctrination,
We are
insanity that
Christians, right?
I don't understand. If your history of your cult that you're involved in has child rape, molestation, and child marriages within the history, like last year, I think that you need to rethink, involvement. If there's illegal activity going on, or whether hey, Aryan Nation sounds good, maybe I'll join that, and you know, I don't know, and
I think you're too far gone at that point.
handful of years ago, they were, in jail and in prison. I think that we need to rethink our joining. We as people, I think, sometimes do suffer from loneliness, lack of connection, isolation, where we want to join. And we're like in a sense, we want to join others in a cause that's greater than ours, that is perceived as greater than ours. We don't like being isolated as people. Now, some people do, but most people don't want to be isolated 24/7 in their life. And so having relational connections, like Sharia said, or having those love bombs come, it's like, wow, I'm loved here. I am successful here. People want me here. Um, yeah, what happens when you want to leave that place? And that's the disfellowship problem, where churches are notorious for disfellowshipping people. And that's a signature marker of a cult, is when you do something wrong, or you're not living up to the standard of whatever, you're disfellowshipped, or you just want to leave and you want to do something else, you're disfellowshipped. So I think that the idea, the practice of disfellowship is something to really pay attention to. I think that in churches today, in Christian churches, we have some of these practices and ideologies kind of sprinkled through our evangelicalism that we need to be very careful of. And so hating a group of people, well, that's very supremacy. And so there is something called Christian supremacy. There is something also called moral supremacy. So if we think that our morality is better than your morality, we start treating people as like this, where we're treating them down.
Mm-hmm.
Signature markers of cults right there. So even our practices that we deem this group an other, they're not matching up to God's design. They're not following the created order. Things that we definitely attach very divine statements to. That's dangerous theology, and that's the sprinkling of supremacy within our within our within our churches. I think that disfellowship, used to call it excommunication, isn't even biblical. You can't even find that in the Bible. And if you go to Matthew 18, I can deconstruct that in about 2 seconds. So you can't even find disfellowship in Scripture. So the practice of that in our churches is infiltrated in our churches. High controlling narcissistic leaders sprinkled throughout our churches. So I think it's time for reform in our evangelicalism, and in our plight to be the Christian church. I think that life is telling us that there is a demand for reform. I think one thing, just on the national stage and the social media stage, that we need to question, no one's questioning this at all, is the idea of the influencer. just on the national stage. And if you're a social media influencer, what are you influencing at that point? Some people have literally millions of followers, and they're speaking little ideologies out there, or little practices, or little principles that I get very concerned that millions of people are listening to just some famous person because they made movies or they did this or that, and they start speaking a very philosophical, psychological, theological message from their mouth. That's very dangerous. We live in dangerous times in that way. And how do we counteract that as Christians? We just are very carefully obedient to Christ's greatest command, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself, to follow through with God's commands of including the other and making sure that the poor, needy, naked, and houseless are fed and housed and taken care of. That when we act like that, and that the poor will always be among you, wealth is not a spiritual goal at that point, like material wealth. Influence is not a spiritual goal. And so we need to really check, I think, some of our practices, who we're listening to, and how easily it can be that we can get trapped into what we would deem as a cult. Any other thoughts? Sharia, Jake?
I think we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks for joining. Thanks for including your thoughts. If anyone has any other thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to leave those on direct message, we can listen to those. Next week, we're going to talk about other people's holidays. So, and I say it that way because the three of us celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving. I don't want to talk about Thanksgiving and Christmas. I want to talk about other people's holidays next week, and find out what other people are doing, and to include those in my thoughts and in my thinking space. So I hope that the two of you can help me do that next week. All right. With that, thanks everybody, and